He just moved into his dream home, but the neighborhood had other plans. What happened next shocked everyone. Watch till the end. Like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories. The second the wrought iron gates of Oakwood Estates opened for me, I felt it. That low hum of tension vibrating just beneath the surface. It wasn't anything obvious at first. The lawns were perfectly manicured, the streets quiet, birds chirping lazily from the tall oaks lining the cul-de-sac. But there was something else, too. Curtains twitching slightly, lawn sprinklers stopping mid-rotation, a stillness in the air, too perfect, too aware, like a neighborhood holding its breath. I turned slowly onto the final curve of the street, the purring engine of my brand-new silver Rolls-Royce Ghost, the only sound cutting through the hush. The sun was just high enough to reflect off the chrome, drawing attention whether I wanted it or not. The address burned in my mind. 1542 Oakwood Drive. My house. My first home. Not just a place to sleep, but the reward of years of late nights, failed launches, long pitches, and a relentless grind that people said would burn me out before I hit 25. As the mansion came into view, stone facade, black-tiled roof, and towering white columns, I should have been flooded with pride. But instead, a knot began to form in my gut. I couldn't quite say why. Maybe it was the eerie quiet. Maybe it was that tingle of being watched. Or maybe I'd lived long enough in this skin to know when trouble was coming before it had a name. I turned into the driveway and rolled to a stop. The tires whispered against the smooth stone, and, for a brief moment, I just sat there. I hadn't even shut off the engine yet when I saw her. In the rearview mirror, storming straight toward me like a middle-aged missile in designer sunglasses and moral superiority, came a woman I would soon come to know far too well. Short blonde bob, pastel cardigan that fluttered in the breeze like a war flag, and the kind of stride that suggested she thought she owned the pavement. Every step radiated a fury that had absolutely nothing to do with me as a person, and everything to do with what I represented. She didn't pause, didn't knock, didn't ask. She came right up to my car, planting herself just inches from my door like she was a bouncer at an exclusive club. Her voice pierced through the glass like a siren. "Excuse me, who are you and what are you doing with that vehicle?" I sighed and cut the engine. I could already feel where this was going, but I wasn't about to let her write the whole script. I stepped out slowly, car keys in one hand, keeping my posture open, my tone pleasant. "Hi there. I'm Jason. Just moved in today. 1542. She blinked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Her eyes dropped to my sneakers, then traveled up to my button-up shirt, like she was scanning for a name tag or a logo to explain what I was doing in a car like that. Her face twisted with disbelief. "That's impossible," she snapped. "The Millers sold their home to a young professional. You're barely out of high school." "I'm 21, I replied, still smiling, though it felt increasingly forced. "And I'm the new homeowner here. Papers finalized last week." She folded her arms tight across her chest, eyes narrowing, voice dropping into something colder. "Nobody your age can afford this kind of car. Unless they've stolen it. I'm calling the police." I didn't flinch. I'd been through worse. I leaned back on my car and met her glare without a trace of fear. "I'm not going anywhere," I said calmly. "This is my house. That's my car." But she was already dialing, holding eye contact with me like she expected me to bolt at any moment, like she was some sheriff in an old western and I was the outlaw caught red-handed. "Yes, officer," she said into her phone, her voice loud and theatrical. "There's a suspicious young man with a luxury vehicle. It looks stolen." I believe this is a grand theft auto situation. I pulled out my phone and texted my assistant. Might be late. Welcome wagon turned into a police report. As she ended the call, she gave me a look of smug triumph. They'll be here any minute. I suggest you don't try anything. I'm not, I said again, but I don't believe I caught your name. Karen Wellington, she said with pride, as though it should mean something to me. President of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association. 6 consecutive terms. Of course, her name was Karen. The universe had a cruel sense of humor. She stepped back and began circling my car like a vulture, snapping pictures with her phone. You don't look like a homeowner in this neighborhood. Certainly not someone who should be driving a $300,000 vehicle. Is this drug money, or did you hack someone's bank account? I didn't answer. What was there to say? Her voice echoed off the polished houses as a few curious neighbors peeked out from their doors and windows. No one said a word. Not yet, but their silence was loud enough. I've seen this before, she declared to no one in particular. Young man shows up with luxury goods they couldn't possibly afford. Next thing you know, we've got drug deals on the corner and crime rates going up. Not on my watch. I walked calmly to the passenger's side, opened the glove compartment, and pulled out my vehicle registration and insurance documents. Karen, I said evenly, I'm a tech entrepreneur. My company was acquired last year. Here's the paperwork. Bought the car from Beverly Hills Auto Gallery. She glanced at the documents but didn't take them. Anyone can forge paperwork. My nephew works in cybersecurity. Criminals are getting smarter. The sound of distant sirens began to rise, growing louder. I could see the lights reflecting off the polished windows down the street. 2 police cruisers turned onto the cul-de-sac and came to a slow stop just beyond my driveway. Karen's posture changed immediately. She straightened her shoulders, smoothed her cardigan, and adopted the stance of a woman who believed she had just saved the neighborhood. Officers, she called out, rushing to them. Thank goodness. I caught this man red-handed. He's claiming to live here, but I'm the HOA president. I know every resident. He's clearly a fraud. One officer, older with a gray mustache and a patient expression, turned to me. Sir, we received a report of a stolen vehicle. May I see your license and registration? Of course, I replied, handing them over without hesitation. Jason Chen. I closed on this house last week. Just moving in today. The younger officer began reviewing the documents while the older one watched Karen, who hovered close behind him like a hawk. He's obviously using a fake ID, she hissed. I personally review every new homeowner application. He would never qualify. That car, it's too expensive. He's barely legal. The older officer raised an eyebrow, but stayed professional. Ma'am, please step back and let us verify the information. As they walked toward their cruiser, Karen continued to mutter loudly about keeping the neighborhood safe and criminals in disguise. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I knew what the truth was, and soon enough so would they. And as I stood there, the cul-de-sac, watching, I realized something chilling. This wasn't about the car. It wasn't even about the house. It was about the fact that someone like me, someone who looked like me, had the audacity to exist in a place where people like her had decided I didn't belong. And the real story hadn't even started yet. The longer I stood in my own driveway, the more surreal the scene became. The Rolls-Royce gleamed in the afternoon sun, a silent witness to the absurdity unfolding around it. Karen Wellington paced the concrete like a self-declared sheriff, her phone clutched in one hand and her gaze bouncing between me and the police cruisers. Her lips moved constantly, spewing suspicion and indignation as if every word were a part of a prepared statement for the nightly news. A few neighbors had now fully emerged from their homes. They stood on their porches or by the edge of their driveways, arms crossed, lips tight. Some whispered to each other, others just stared. It was hard to tell if they were curious, skeptical, or silently cheering her on, but not one of them stepped forward. I could feel the tension coiling round me like a snake. I'd seen this before, in a high-end hotel in San Francisco, where a manager accidentally canceled my reservation after seeing my ID. At a car dealership in Atlanta, where the salesman asked me 3 times if my financing was real. In the airport lounge where I was once asked if I was lost. And now, here, in the neighborhood I'd dreamed of living in, I was once again being treated like an intruder. Karen was relentless. "You really expect anyone to believe this is yours," she barked, still circling the Rolls-Royce like it might confess under pressure. "I know the kind of people this neighborhood attracts. We have doctors, lawyers, retired CEOs, not app developers." "I built cybersecurity infrastructure," I replied calmly, though I doubted she cared about the distinction. "We helped Fortune 500s secure back-end vulnerabilities. My company was acquired last November." But she didn't even blink. "I'm sure you know all the right techie words. That doesn't make you a homeowner. You think slick talk and a nice shirt can pass you off as someone respectable?" I inhaled slowly, fighting the tightening in my chest. "The title is in my name. I have the documentation." "Oh, please," she sneered. "You're what, 20? 21? Nobody that age drives a Rolls-Royce unless they're in trouble with the law. This is classic laundering. You must think we're idiots." She lifted her phone again and began snapping more pictures of me, of the license plate, even of the front of the house. Her voice rose in volume, clearly aiming for an audience. "I'm documenting this for the record," she declared to the gathering onlookers. "The HOA has standards. We've worked hard to build a safe community. I won't let some shady story ruin that." I caught a movement from across the street. A woman in a pink tracksuit shook her head, muttering something under her breath. A man in a polo shirt stepped back into his house and closed the door. And yet the silence remained heavy. No one challenged her. No one told her she was out of line. They watched as if this were a live performance, uncomfortable but familiar. Then the older police officer returned, walking toward me with my documents still in hand. His partner followed a step behind, giving Karen a wide berth. "Everything appears to be in order," the officer said, not unkindly. "Vehicles registered to Jason Chen. Deed for the property shows a legal transfer last week. No flags." Karen's face twitched. "That can't be right," she snapped. "Check again. He's probably hacked into some system. People like him?" The officer's brows knit together. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "what exactly do you mean by people like him?" Karen faltered. Her mouth opened and closed once before she tried to recover. "I mean, young people. It's just common sense. A 21-year-old doesn't belong in a neighborhood like this. Not with that car. Something's clearly off." The younger officer stepped away to speak into his radio, but I could tell by his posture that the situation had shifted. Karen didn't seem to notice. "I'm protecting our community," she went on, her voice climbing again. "We can't allow the wrong elements to drag our property values down. I've seen this before. It starts with one flashy stranger, then next thing you know, the crime stats spike, schools go downhill." "Karen," I interrupted gently, "I'm not a threat. I just want to move into my home. That's all. You're not what this neighborhood is built for, she snapped. And there it was, the mask slipping. She didn't just see me as a stranger, she saw me as an outsider, someone who didn't fit the picture she had in her head when she imagined who should be watering their lawn across the street or driving through the gates at night. A murmur passed through the crowd now. One man rubbed the back of his neck, visibly uncomfortable. Another whispered something to his wife. Even the neighbor in the pink tracksuit looked like she'd had enough. I think you've made your point, a voice said quietly. We all turned. A silver-haired man from 2 houses down had stepped forward. He was holding up a phone. Sorry to interrupt, but I think the officers might want to see this. Karen scoffed. What is it, Alan? Another cat video? No, he replied coolly. It's from my Ring camera. I was in my office when this started. The audio's very clear, including when you said, and I quote, "We don't need his kind lowering property values. I'll have him removed one way or another." Karen's face drained of color. That's taken completely out of context, she stammered. I was talking about community standards. The officer glanced at me, then at Karen. His jaw was tight. Ma'am, I'd like to speak with you privately. Please, come with me. But, she began, now. As they stepped aside, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. The crowd started to shift. I caught someone nodding at me. Another woman mouthed, sorry. No one defended her anymore. The younger officer approached and handed back my documents. Everything checks out, he said quietly. You're free to go about your day, Mr. Chen. I nodded. Thank you. He hesitated, glancing toward Karen, then back at me. I'm sorry this happened. It shouldn't have. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some things didn't require words. A few moments later, I heard Karen's voice spike from behind the police cruiser. You can't be serious. I was doing my civic duty. Then came the unmistakable tone of Miranda rights being read aloud. I stood still, letting it sink in. The woman who tried to have me arrested for existing in a neighborhood she deemed hers was now being arrested herself. The irony was sharp and deeply satisfying. But I didn't smile. I just picked up my phone and texted my assistant again. Never mind. Might be right on time after all. Karen's voice rang out like a siren over the quiet cul-de-sac, rising above the murmurs of the onlookers. I have rights! This is a misunderstanding! I was protecting my community! Her words were frantic now, no longer the calculated assertions of a confident gatekeeper, but the unraveling shouts of someone realizing that the ground beneath her carefully polished shoes was crumbling fast. The officers didn't respond to her pleas. The older one, still calm but clearly no longer interested in her theatrics, guided her away from the cruiser and toward the sidewalk, where he could speak to her out of the crowd's earshot. But the neighbors watched. They all did. Some with open curiosity, some with long simmering resentment, and some with silent recognition. Karen had made herself a fixture of this place for years. Always watching, always judging, always controlling. Now the cracks in her crown were fully visible. I stood by my car, arms crossed loosely, still trying to process the absurdity of what was happening. This was supposed to be my move-in day. I should have been figuring out where to put the couch, not defending my right to exist. The younger officer lingered near me, almost like he wasn't sure if he should go or stay. His voice was quiet. She's made complaints before, he said, eyes flicking toward the now cornered Karen. Usually about barking dogs or unapproved lawn decorations. Never like this, though. I nodded, saying nothing. She seemed convinced you were a criminal. I met his gaze. That's the problem. She wasn't looking for proof. She saw what she needed to see the second I stepped out of the car. He didn't argue, just sighed. I get it, he said after a moment. At least I'm trying to. That, at least, was something. The older officer reappeared a few minutes later, his expression unreadable. Karen followed behind him, her steps no longer sharp but heavy, dragged down by the weight of consequences. Her mouth was tight, her sunglasses perched back on her face like armor. She clutched her phone, but for once she wasn't talking. "Mrs. Wellington," the officer said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "we've reviewed the statements, recordings, and documentation. You're being placed under arrest for filing a false police report and for verbal harassment with discriminatory intent." A stunned silence fell over the cul-de-sac. Karen froze. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "I am," he replied, pulling out a notepad and beginning to write. Karen turned to the crowd, her voice breaking. "You're all just going to stand there? I've served this community for 6 terms. Nobody moved. "I was protecting property values," she shrieked, suddenly defensive. "Do you want drug dealers on your street? Do you want—" A woman from the crowd interrupted. "We want peace, Karen. You haven't given us that in years." It was like a dam broke. Another voice chimed in. "She reported my kid for playing basketball at 7 p.m. Then another. "Told my wife her garden gnome was tacky." And another. "She left 3 letters about our recycling bin being visible." Karen's face turned bright red. "This is all being twisted. You're attacking me for doing what none of you had the courage to do." "No," the man from earlier, the one with the doorbell footage, said firmly. "We're holding you accountable." The officer finished his writing and turned to Karen again. "Turn around, please." She didn't resist, but her words kept flowing even as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. "This is reverse discrimination. I have an attorney. You'll all regret this. This is my neighborhood." The younger officer opened the cruiser door and gently guided her inside. Karen looked out the window at us as if trying to will her control back into existence, but the only thing staring back was a street full of people who had finally had enough. When the door closed, the crowd slowly began to disperse. Some offered me small nods. A few came up to say welcome in subdued voices that seemed both genuine and a little ashamed. One man offered to help with the boxes in my trunk. Another asked if I needed recommendations for movers. Slowly, the street began to breathe again. A woman approached quietly from next door. Middle-aged, glasses, quiet energy. She hesitated before speaking. "I'm sorry," she said. "We should have said something sooner. She's been difficult for a long time." "It's okay," I said, though it wasn't. "You're saying something now." She nodded and walked away, leaving me standing at the edge of the driveway as the cruiser pulled away with Karen inside. I didn't cheer, I didn't smile, but inside me something settled. Not satisfaction exactly, just clarity, a confirmation that standing still, refusing to shrink, had meant something. As I reached for my keys again, my phone buzzed. A message from my assistant. "Delivery team confirmed. Movers will be there in an hour. Welcome home, boss." I looked up at the house again. For the first time that day, I let myself feel it. Ownership, not of just a property, but of my place here, no matter who liked it or not. And inside, where no one could see, I smiled. The days that followed were quiet in a way that felt intentional, as though the entire neighborhood was waiting to see what would happen next, holding its collective breath. Gone were the suspicious stares, the twitching curtains, the whispered comments when I walked to the mailbox. In their place was a kind of cautious civility, awkward nods, hesitant greetings, neighbors crossing the street to offer a hand with a box or a lawn tool. Karen Wellington had vanished from Oakwood Drive. It wasn't just her absence that echoed through the cul-de-sac. It was the sudden absence of fear. Conversations bloomed between neighbors who had avoided each other for years. A group of kids played basketball in a driveway without someone shouting at them about noise ordinances. A woman down the block put up a pride flag in her yard, something I was told Karen would have sent a formal complaint about in any other week. Then, 7 days after it all happened, a letter arrived. Thick, white envelope embossed with the seal of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association. For a second, I wondered if it might be some sort of apology, or, knowing Karen, a retaliatory fine for disturbance of peace. But when I opened it, a different truth unfolded. To Mr. Jason Chen, following an emergency board meeting held on June 14th, the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association hereby notifies you that Mrs. Karen Wellington has been officially suspended from her role as HOA president pending further review. After a unanimous vote, 27-0, she has been permanently removed from all leadership positions within the association. Furthermore, Mrs. Wellington has been issued a fine of $5,000 for filing a false police report, and she is required to complete 60 hours of community service under the jurisdiction of the county office. We sincerely apologize for the events that took place on your move-in day and hope to welcome you more appropriately as a valued member of our community. Respectfully, George L. Mann, Acting President, Oakwood Estates HOA. I read it twice, then a third time. A soft laugh escaped my lips, half disbelief, half relief. The so-called Queen of Oakwood had been dethroned, not by protest or confrontation, not by yelling or threats, but by her own arrogance, her own words, her own inability to understand that times had changed, and her power was never real to begin with. Just noise, bluster, and intimidation, wrapped in pastels and rules. The rumors came quickly after that. Her real estate agency had placed her on indefinite leave after several clients pulled their listings, citing concerns about her public behavior. One particularly wealthy client reportedly called her a liability. Some said she tried to spin the incident into a discrimination case of her own, claiming she was unjustly targeted for her leadership. But few seemed interested in listening anymore. Weeks passed. Then, one afternoon, while I was grabbing a few groceries at the local organic market, I saw her. Karen. She stood near the produce aisle, staring at a bag of oranges like it held all the answers in the world. She looked smaller somehow. Same haircut, same sunglasses perched atop her head, but the energy around her had shifted. There was no swagger in her steps, no pointed glares. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the bag back on the shelf and reached for her cart. Then she saw me. Our eyes met for a second, and in that moment, everything froze. She went pale, truly pale. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but instead, she looked away, turned sharply, and left the cart behind. She hurried out of the store, nearly bumping into an elderly man on her way to the parking lot. She didn't look back. I stood there for a while, staring at the abandoned cart. Part of me thought she might come back. Another part knew she wouldn't. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to say. That night, I sat on the back patio of my new home, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The sounds of the neighborhood surrounded me. Kids laughing, someone grilling a steak, a radio playing soft jazz from an open window. This was what I had worked for. Not just the house or the car or the title, but the ability to sit in peace, to exist without being questioned, to belong without needing to explain. And I realized something then. Karen hadn't just been a nuisance. She'd been a symbol of every room I wasn't supposed to walk into, every conversation I was told I didn't belong in, every time I was second-guessed, undermined, or judged before I even spoke. And now, that symbol had lost its power. Not because I fought, but because I stood. I leaned back in the chair and looked up at the stars as they blinked into view. Welcome home, I thought. This time it felt real. Sometimes justice doesn't need to shout. It just waits for the truth to speak. If this story moved you, like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.